Library's Lunch at the Library series. I'm Deb Arns. I'm curator of the Heritage Room of Nebraska Authors here at Bennett Martin Public Library right downstairs. And I'd like to take a moment to thank the Nebraska Literary Heritage Association, whose support makes this series possible, and their support of the Heritage Room in our efforts to preserve Nebraska's literary history. I'd like to mention that today's program is being filmed by LNK TV and will be available for viewing on public access television and the City of Lincoln and Lincoln City Library's YouTube channel in just a little time. So one note before we introduce today's speaker, I introduce her. Next month will be our last lunch at the library for the spring, and it will be Mary Ann Marco. She's the author of the book 4.5 Miles West of Sydney. That will be on April 1st at 12:10 here. And then we'll take a break and we'll pick up again in the fall. So we look forward to seeing you then. So I'll introduce today's speaker. Linda Pawlenty is a truck driver and volunteers as an English language teacher for Spanish speakers. She holds a PhD in literary studies from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. While earning her PhD in literature, Linda Pawlenty worked as a concrete mixer driver, navigating life as a working class laborer in academia and as a woman academic in construction. In her book, Clutch, she reflects on moving between these worlds, the satisfaction of mastering heavy machinery, the pride of being the first in her family to pursue a doctorate, and the challenges of sexual harassment and classism. Through these experiences, Pawlenty offers a sharp perspective on gender, class, labor, and whiteness, examining how power and belonging shift across contexts and illuminating what it means to claim space when one is not always welcome. So please join me in welcoming Linda.
Hello. I have to stay right here. So sorry for that. Well, thank you all for coming today. I really appreciate everybody's time. I said I was not joking at the beginning. Think of your truck driving questions, because you got me here now. So I'm going to expect everything you ever want to know about trucking. This is the hour for it. So I think I'll start by telling you a little bit more, I suppose, about what the book's about, tell you a little bit about my background, and then I will read some passages. If at any point during this you have a question, let me know. So we don't have to wait to the end. Or a comment or anything like that. So I live here in Lincoln. I moved here from Blair, Nebraska to go to the university for my PhD. I had done my other university work in Omaha, at the University of Nebraska in Omaha. And while I was here and progressing through that process of writing a dissertation and everything, that's where the book started to come from. I was in literary studies, so studying American literature, and more specifically, literature written about work or labor. When I say labor, I mean work, not the other kind of labor, which I have no experience with. And as I was going through that, I was teaching. As you're a graduate student, you have to teach younger college students. So I was teaching them mostly composition, but I was also going out and driving a concrete mixer at the same time. I had been, literally, I would, have my teaching clothes on and do that, and then run out and change my clothes and put on my high visibility and go get in the concrete mixer, because somebody had to pay for, rent and everything like that, and it was just me. So what were you going to do? I had been a driver before. Actually, I'm laughing. There's a gentleman here in the audience who knows one of my professors from when I had a BA, and that's when this dream to be a truck driver suddenly took hold. I was going to finish my bachelor's, get a commercial driver's license, drive for a year, and come back to school. That's more or less what happened. So I drove over the road for a little bit. I drove in Nebraska and Kansas and Iowa and South Dakota to feedlots and dairies hauling cattle feed, which is pretty crazy because you're taking a semi-truck on a feedlot And you know how many tractors have pulled me out, like from getting stuck? A lot of tractors, because it's just mud, especially in this type of weather. So I had done that for a while, and then eventually gone back to school, and that's what prompted me when I came to the PhD program, and I knew I had to get a job, to think, well, what should I do? I know trucking. I want to keep trucking. And I found that job as a concrete mixer driver right here in town. They were very, very flexible with hours. So that's why that job worked really well for me. My experience had been driving different trucks, not in construction, right? More in agriculture. But they were very flexible, let me go to class, come back and forth, and do those things, which I appreciated and worked really well. So the book was born out of doing, the studies and then running out into the street and all of a sudden experiencing these things that we were talking about in the classroom. Because as a graduate student in literary studies, we were talking about novels and things like that, but also about classism within these novels, racism, sexism, all of those things, and many others. And so as I would, go out and pour concrete, here I am, all of a sudden, really, really understanding that the things we were discussing in the classroom were just unfolding right in front of me, and I had a really big part in that, So I started to write about it. Instead of writing a dissertation that was, pretty obscure, I convinced my advisors to let me write something that incorporated a lot of my own experience, in addition to all these famous novels and everything like that. If you're looking for a good read about work, one of the things that really influenced me was Jack London wrote this book in 1909 called Martin Eden. And Martin Eden's a sailor, and he gets off the ship and meets this wealthy family and sort of gets adopted into the family, starts dating the daughter. But the opening is just amazing because he's a sailor. And as soon as he comes into their living room, he doesn't, he's bumping into things and he feels like he's still on a ship and he just doesn't fit in the room. And it's a beautiful opening scene and it described perfectly sort of what I feel like, even up here. Like, why am I at a podium, like awkward and kicking stuff and, it just doesn't really work. And then it kind of goes through that particular novel and describes this working class man's experience dating somebody who his girlfriend only had this experience of school. So it would say things like, hey, a lot of times they would discuss poetry together and he could dissect those poems so much better than she could because he had lived life and he knew all about it. And her only experience was what she had been taught in school, which were really the experiences of others. And that really resonated. So, very frankly, I started getting having this crisis as I finished school because I was out there living life, and a lot of my classmates were maybe not living it in the same way. So when you talk about class, which we didn't honestly talk about that often, that was one of the subjects maybe that wasn't as kind of widely studied. Where did that experience come from? Well, talk about class, talk about mixer truck drivers. So that's what the book deals with. It tries to navigate these two worlds, right? Being an academic, whatever that is exactly, and then being out there working. And for me, I still don't have the answers, but the book is trying to find answers between how these two things intersect and why it often seems better maybe that I went out and got my PhD. If you're going to be proud of me for something, right, it's being a doctor, which I usually forget I am one. But I think my dad's proud of me now, but at the beginning he was like, truck driving? He gave me the check for the tuition to truck driving school after I got my BA and said, I just hope you do this for more than a month. That was in 2006, I believe. So we got our money's worth. So it's become something I really intended to do for a year. Has become really just a part of me, just a huge part of me now. I am a truck driver. As soon as I get done speaking with all of you today, I will go back, put my high-vis sweatshirt back on, and get back in. I drive a dump truck now, or a truck and pup. Here's your first trucking trivia. Who knows what a pup is when I say truck and pup? Yes.
It's the one that goes behind them.
Yes, you're amazing. Nobody ever knows that.
I mean, it was an insurance adjuster.
There you go. Thank you so much. So the dump truck, and then, yes, the one that trails behind. So, all right. Maybe I'll read, since I've been talking a lot about me. Let me read just, I think, the very opening scene of the book. Let me tell you a little bit about the format first. It is a mix, I would say, of creative nonfiction. It's all creative nonfiction, but it has moments where it's very essay-like, maybe some prose poems. I think a professor described it as prose poems. I don't write poetry, but I can write prose. And then a little bit of analysis, but not analysis, right? But like reflecting back on what some of these experiences meant and drawing in a little bit of works by other folks in which to do so. But the first part, this is just purely prose, written one morning after I had arrived to work at the concrete plant and just kind of made some observations. And this part is called Dawning. It is that hour, the sun dawning a speckle of pink in the east, and I breathe in the gift of being awake to it. Standing in the parking lot with my head thrown back to the sky, searching for stars, marveling, gaping at the bright white fuzz of the moon. I bend the silver handle of the door of my truck cab clicks open. I climb up and inside and pull it shut behind me, safe, powerful. This is a home. A long, strong, silent row of machines begins to buzz and utters a guttural purr as one by one we drivers arrive for the day and take our dutiful places. To see each other in the darkness of dawn is intimate. It is best, though, when I am there before all this bustle, and the heavy silence, the peace and incongruity of standing in a concrete wasteland but being able to hear birds trill and whistle, joy and beauty. It is best when that silence and dark amplifies the massive, heavy bodies of our trucks, and I feel more where I am. Every part of my truck has a different texture, and I run my hand across these parts and sense the bigness of what I am doing, not hauling concrete, but becoming a part of this giant as we prepare to move together across and through the city, into its green spaces and most intimate recesses of alleyways in history. Fantastical, because there are others beside me doing it too, one unit, although we are so individual. There are simply so many men here in this alternate reality where inexplicably 99% of the women have vanished. Men here with me, my fellow drivers, yes, my compadres, my brothers, my little brothers, my uncles, my nemesis, my I adore you or you drive me crazy depending on the day. Yes, those men, but also so many men at job sites, the contractors, customers, clientes, whatever you want to call them, at this place and that place and that place and that one. There is never any doubt what I will find because it is a certainty that there are just men everywhere, and I am used to it and I am not. But more importantly, there is the driving, this truck, my truck, this force of a natural home more mine than the one where I lay my head. The driving is a beautiful thing, and me in that truck is a beautiful thing, and so are the concrete jobs, where I can be a blessing to the men there, or I can wreak havoc, although I don't, because it's too beautiful to do work with others and to share the stress and the sweat and the danger and the laughing and the love that those small moments beget when you're all there fighting for the same damn thing. And so as I read that now again to myself, I should say too, because it jumps out at me, that while we're also trying to figure out the class lines and what all this means in the book, it also deals a lot with gender, because it sort of has to. You know, you can't go out there and be me and drive a mixer truck and not think about gender, whether you want to or not. And so there are many of those moments in there where I would just like to go and be me and do my thing, but somebody, regardless of what I feel, has to sort of change that for me during the day, right? And sometimes there's a lot of small moments in the book, these small moments where somebody says something, usually, thankfully, a lot of it's just comments, and that would just send me into a bit of a spiral, right? And you're thinking, man, I'm just trying to come out here and haul my concrete, and why did we have to make it about, my eye makeup, and what that meant? I'm like, why you're commenting on that? So there's a lot of that in here. I had a young female coworker there at the concrete plant who read this and said it was like a love letter to trucking, which I wouldn't, you don't get those things from reading your own work. So that was also very nice to hear. How are we doing so far? Okay. Does anybody know why we call it a concrete mixer and not a cement mixer? Any guesses?
I thought they were the same thing.
Thanks, Leslie. They're not the same thing. Yes, sir.
Isn't concrete the aggregate that includes stones and things like that, and the cement is one element of it?
You could not have said that better. Yep. Cement's an ingredient or one element of concrete, along with water, sand, and rock. So if you call it a cement mixer, it's fine. But I'm going to correct you. So now you know they're concrete mixers. All right. Let me go forth and read to you from the first section where it really starts talking about what the book is trying to do. Okay. This is a book about trucks and work and books and schooling, because those are the things that made me, make me, and to take anyone away is to blur the rest, to alter, be dishonest, break me. This is also a book about power. And this is a book about how I navigate separate worlds as a PhD in academia and in my job as a truck driver in the construction industry. Within those seemingly separate spheres, trucking and the university, there is still more division. Gendered worlds, classed worlds, worlds divided by language, by bodies, and united by all of this too. My identity is stitched together from incongruous pieces, parts complex and misperceived. To be working class, to be educated, but the words are wrong. They cut, they wound, they go deep, but not deep enough. Regardless of how I name these parts, here I am. I exist with a foot firmly in each land. And yet living with a border underneath me does not feel stable, does not allow me to be at ease. This border between classes and peoples, expectations and comforts, languages and movements. How do I navigate that? How does anybody? I move differently, not like the men or like the women, like the drivers or the professors. But I'm happy with my walk, that it is different, that it is powerful. I'm powerful. I have solid self-assurance that the people I work alongside every day, the people who physically labor, my people, deserve better than what we get from the people that employ us, the people making laws, the people molding curriculum. Even with this unwavering belief, there are moments when I am swallowed by doubt and loss of hope and the exhaustion of knowing we'll always be fighting the shitty types of people and power in this world. So this book is about that power, that larger-than-life force that bears down on us and compels us to question the course we've charted or the one we've dreamed of. It is about the forms power takes in the life of an academic and a truck driver, the power of machines and the bodies that drive them, the power of gender, of the academy and middle management, the power of language, of education and labor, of sabotage and resistance, of class. It is about the power to resist the conditioning, to do what we've been told to, and to hold our tongues. This book is about the long road to get to that place of resistance. And as I read and reflect on that, there's quite a bit in here about, if you leave the university out of it, there within our own work world at the concrete company, there was a lot of struggle just not to be, we had a safety woman one time refer to us as assets, and I was like, I raised my hand like any good English student in the middle of this meeting, and I said, those are the trucks. Insurance, right? Like, those are the trucks. We're people. But it often didn't really shake out that way. So, not so fun fact, there's no lunch breaks when you're a concrete mixer driver unless there's no concrete to haul. And you know what they say when you say, where's my lunch break? They say, well, yesterday it rained and you sat for 3 hours. I said, that's great, but I'm hungry today. Like, it doesn't carry over like that, right? So there's a lot of issues there. And so that's not what this primarily deals with, but it certainly creeps in because it really has to. So I thought of writing a second one. I'd call it Break, Probably won't, but it was a cute idea. So, any questions right now about anything? Yes, ma'am.
Do you have an understanding of what made your interest in being a commercial driver and also your academic subject?
Thank you for that question. Leslie wanted me to address that earlier, and I had kind of forgotten. So I don't want to disappoint you. I'm not sure if I did. Like, for an understanding of what made me want to be a commercial driver, that's a question I get asked pretty frequently, right? Why would you want to do this? A lot of women are like, I couldn't do that. Well, yeah, I understand why you think that way, because you've been taught to think that way. That's not true. I don't, we would drive down the interstates on family vacations, and I would see these trucks and think that was really cool, and we'd do the normal thing. When I was going to UNO for my bachelor's, I would see these commercials for JTL truck driving school in Omaha on all the time. And I think something just came together. It might be genetic, because my dad he's the map reader. He's that guy in the passenger seat who's like with the paper map. My uncle was a bus driver, 40 years in Minneapolis, and my other uncle, a cab driver. It might be genetic. So I went to JDL. I called him up before I had graduated with my BA, and I enrolled myself. I graduated in December. In January, I was in truck driving school. So, yeah, my parents were like, what's going on? But she's employed, so that's fine. Academia, I had a hard time finding my path in academia because when I left high school, I just wanted to get out of Nebraska, right? We all know that story, and I'm back, so that says something. But I went to New York because I was born in New York, in Rome there. My parents were in the Air Force. And I tried psychology because I was a fan of Bob Newhart. That doesn't make sense. I'm so glad you all know what I'm talking about. I wanted to be a photojournalist, but I'm much too shy for that. But I tried those things. I came back here. I tried nursing. I was like, well, if I'm going to be a nurse, I should be a doctor. I am, sort of, but not that kind of doctor. Organic chemistry did me in, and someone said, why don't you try English? You really love English. And it never occurred to me to get a degree in English. And that was the exact right fit, though. That was the exact right fit. Now I think I also would have liked to study languages, but English was a good place. And she mentioned in the introduction that I taught the English language to Spanish-speaking adults. I do really enjoy teaching, so I think that was one reason where I could just talk about books to other people and they'd have to listen all the time. I should go do that, and so that just became my path. So, yeah. Thank you for asking. Yes, sir?
How much different is driving a truck with a full load from driving an empty truck?
Quite different. Quite different.
How do you know it?
How do I know it's different?
I
Well,
mean, what's the experience?
okay. you can really feel that weight. And so concrete mixers that was new for me because they've got a high center of gravity because they've got that drum turning, and they can hold 10.5 yards of concrete, the ones you'll see here around Lincoln. And these are really nice because you'll see these mixers here, well, if you notice, they don't have that set of axles that goes up and down. The ones they use here in town, they're much closer to the ground, and you can raise them up and drop them, but they don't do that kind of thing. So they're actually pretty stable. But the only thing that made me very uncomfortable about that job was because construction's fun because you're not on pavement. It's also terrifying sometimes because you're not on pavement. And when they want you to drive across something that's not flat, you're like, I don't know. And then comes that like moment of questioning my gender again, right? Like, I know what gender I am, but thinking, do they think I don't want to do this because it's like, oh, it's a lady, it's the girl, she can't do it, or is it just, it's a bad idea? And so I usually knew when it was a bad idea, but then I always felt like, would the guys do it? And if they would do it, should they be doing it? There was a lot of questioning. So the drums, to get back to the weight, that was kind of scary. You really got to take your turns slowly. And if you go downhill, you go down straight. You don't go down at an angle. There's a little bit about that in here, actually, because I have done some crazy things, but it was safe, but I was pretty proud. Now, the truck and pup, and actually the cattle feed too, that's interesting because most everything you see on the interstate, they weigh, those trucks with a load, they weigh no more than 80,000 pounds, so about 40 tons. You can drive on the highways in Nebraska and weigh 95, or you can get a permit and take that onto the interstate. So 95,000 pounds is a lot of pounds, and the pups are interesting because they sort of float behind you. Like when I get on the interstate and I go 75 with 95,000 pounds, and that's that long trailer at the back, you can feel that guy sort of, we go back to the imagery of the Jack London and the sea, right? Like it really feels like it's floating. And a new thing for me is they put new tires on that pup one day, so it had 6 on each side, so 12 tires. And with brand new tires, and that tread was new, that thing slid around even empty. You could kind of take those turns and you'd feel it sort of jumping, which I think it's scary sometimes, but it's fascinating. I love that because that's just adding to your old. Pretty soon I'll be an old-time trucker with all the insight, And I certainly had a lot of those people who helped me growing up, so it's sort of fun to learn those things. And also the stopping, they actually stop better when they're loaded because that's what they're made to do. That doesn't mean you should cut in front of one, but they are designed to do that. And then if it's raining or anything, I'd rather drive a loaded truck because, again, they're made to stop that way. So empty, it gets a little crazy. So it can. So, no, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I found it fascinating about the championships. I didn't know if there was competition for truck drivers, and can you tell us a little bit about that?
I would love to. I was talking to Leslie a little bit before we began. Did you know there was a Nebraska Truck Driving Championship? Oh, yeah. It's great. It happens I believe it's the end of May, out in Grand Island is where they'll hold that at the fairgrounds. And every state manages it a little bit differently. Nebraska had, or has probably still, 10 different classes of trucks. So you'll have a step van, something you'd see a UPS driver driving. You can have, I think they had flatbeds out there. You'll have different sizes of over-the-road, we call them vans, your typical semi. Maybe one with a sleeper, one with a shorter cab, different sets of axles. Doubles, where there's 2 normal trailers, and a few other things, and then concrete mixers. Mixers aren't included in every state, but Nebraska, they'll lump us all together so we have a chance to compete. And then this is important, you have to have a safe driving record. So the year before, no accidents, no damage. And my record is clean, clean, clean. So if you have a safe record, you can go out there and you can compete. Now, what do you imagine is part of a driving championship? What's that all about? Just maneuvering, right? Yeah, stopping. There's no backing, which is disappointing because I love backing. It's just such a great challenge, and especially downtown. Think about downtown, all these buildings they're throwing up, backing a mixer up through all of that. So fun, yeah. So fun. There's rebar and there's big holes and there's guys running around. But so a lot of maneuvering. They'll have an obstacle course, and here in Nebraska they'll have 5 or 6 obstacles, and they'll be the same for most everybody. But then the mixer trucks come through, and we're the kind of crowd pleasers. So the first year I did it, they literally attached a bowling ball to a chain, put it on the last mixer chute, and we had to drive by these pins and try to knock them down, which seems silly, but it also really does relate to your experience, because one thing that makes a really good mixer driver is being able to see where that chute's going to land, so you can pour that concrete really smoothly for the mostly guys that are pouring the concrete. There's also crowd favorite, the basketball hoop, where they put the basketball in the mixer chute and you drive by the little hoop. Look at me behaving and standing right behind this microphone. And then lower it, right as you need to get it into the basket. And there's other things like you drive by a pretend fuel stop, but it's on your blind side. So you have to line up a certain point on the truck with the imaginary fuel island. So it's a lot about spacing and knowing where your steer tires are at, knowing where your trailer's at. It's a lot of fun. But also, very importantly, because you would not maybe guess this, there is a whole book about trucking information, and there is an 80-question multiple choice test at the Nebraska Truck Driving Championship. So you're going to answer questions about trucking history, every law ever made about trucking, when they went to pneumatic tires, that's a favorite. Things about hazardous materials, things about first aid, things about where you should put your emergency triangles on the road. It's really great, and especially for somebody who is good at studying, a welcome part of an event like that. And they'll also have a short interview with State Patrol comes out there and helps out. And then another really fun part is you'll do a pre-trip inspection, because that's very important. You check the truck over before you get on the road to avoid problems. And what they'll do is they'll have trucks out there and they will plant defects. So they might, this is an obvious one, but I didn't get it. They put duct tape over the license plate. I was like, why is there duct tape on that license plate? And just kept walking, not realizing that was a defect. Or they'll put screws in tires, or an empty alcohol bottle in the cab, or disable the seat belt, or take the cap off the engine oil filler, right? All these things, they love to take valve stem caps off. You know how hard it is it's timed, so you've got 5 minutes to see missing valve stem caps. It's very difficult, but it's really fun. And they'll do that, and they'll put all of those points together, and then, of course, the driving part, the obstacle course is weighted most heavily because that's what everybody's into. But you know what happened in 2024? Guess who won the mixer truck driver part? Right here. Yeah, thank you. And you know why it happened? Because I read that book and studied my butt off. And it was all the difference between first and second. And the guy that won second, turns out I'm his nemesis. He called me that. I didn't make that up. He said, I guess next year I'm going to have to read that book. Yeah. Yeah, friend. Trucking isn't all just show. So, and then the person who wins in the mixer truck class goes to, that year it was Denver, to compete nationally with a bunch of mixer truck drivers from all around the country. And then the person that wins in the other trucking divisions, there's a separate competition for them too. So I did go to Denver in 2024, and Nebraska's great because everybody there is really into their job, right? They are professionals, they've got safe records, and they're proud to be there. And it's sort of like our conference, you get to hang out with other people who are really into it, because not everybody who can drive is a driver, right? Some of them, it's just their job. But serious drivers, you'll go and you get to compete and spend time with other people who feel the same way about trucking that you do. And in Denver with mixer truck drivers, it was the same. You just felt this pride coming from other people, and that gets really wild out there. The obstacles get even more challenging, but I think it's just a fun time to celebrate doing what you do and doing it really well. So yeah, there's plenty of bad truck drivers, but know too, when you see them out there, there's also a lot of people really invested in that is their profession. It is still a profession for a lot of people and not just a job, which is, if you take it back to the book, why a lot of this is so important to me is because, it should be a good profession. And I don't know how. I wrote this thing, I still don't have answers. I wrote my dissertation and I got criticized gently for it being sort of, not the dissertation, the test that I took beforehand, right? You got to do some timed essay test, for it being very meandering, why are there no answers here? This was a lot of interesting questions. And at the time I thought, but that's all there is questions, We don't know the answers to all of these things about how gender is supposed to work. We don't have the answers. I don't have the answers. But ironically, then I wrote the book, and now I want answers so badly, because still when things happen, I think, man, I just would like to stop asking questions about who I am. Why do I have to pick? Why do I have to sort of stand in the middle of these two seemingly very different worlds? Why I wrote the book, and it would be so helpful for like I said, middle management earlier. Those are the people that need to read this, people who can make decisions about what's going to get taught in the schools or universities. They need to read this. I would like other drivers to read this. How much does that happen? Just by way of, I don't know. I don't know if the people who need to read this will ever read this, and that just goes back to, I think, the way we kind of sort of funnel things. This is what you do over here. The baby comes out and we put a pink cap on its head, and its destiny is sort of laid out in front of it, unless something goes wrong and you get some weird truck driver like this. So, yes, ma'am.
I went through the PhD process, and listening to you now, I'm wondering, how did your dissertation committee handle you? And what career do you think you'll be pursuing?
Well, I really appreciate you asking that. So, COVID happened right as, what do I say? Before you write your dissertation, you do a thing called comprehensive exams, and that's the test that I just mentioned. I literally took tests, but a lot of people will write will present a portfolio instead, but I chose not to do that. So COVID kind of happened, and we weren't in the university anymore, and I think that had something to do with it. Things felt disjointed, as it did for a lot of people, although at the concrete plant, it was business as usual. When I hear about people, just staying at home by themselves all the time, that didn't happen for us, right? And that was partially because we're in Nebraska too. But so when I did comps during that part, and when I came out of it, it was time to take that class about helping you find a job. That class, there is a class in the PhD program about helping you to find a job. It only directs people how to find jobs as professors, which arguably is why a lot of people go and get their PhD. But also, there's a big world out there. But for me, I was the only one who was like, I'm going to go to Peru and teach English. And they're like, all right, let us know how that goes, because that was my plan at the time. So my plan at the time was to graduate, because by the time I had got the PhD, I knew from experiencing the work out there and being with my coworkers and everything. I'm sorry I didn't read you more. I just talk so much, but who knew, right? We're all surprised. That I was going to go and I was going to teach English where it could make a difference economically to people who didn't have a chance. I wanted to do it for free to people who didn't have a chance to be able to go to school and get that skill. Because like in a place like Peru, if you could speak English, then you can make a lot of money relatively a lot of money in the tourism industry. That was the plan. I became very, very much disenchanted with the whole university system, and that a lot of my students, whether I would make an impact, that was maybe 1 in 100, who knows, you never know. About the value actually of books when there's people out here with everything, especially with everything that's going on right now, and it has always gone on. Why are we studying these really crazy PhD topics when there's people out there who economically are really struggling and everything else. So I just wasn't into teaching anymore in a university. And I thought, I'm going to go drive for a while and see what comes of it. And my plan wasn't to keep being a truck driver, but I really did think I'd end up teaching in a way that was more immediately necessary. And so at the time, that was the English language. And I'm still sort of in that place too, the English language for people who that could really benefit. Right, and that's just something in their way. So how did they handle me? The dissertation, I was permitted to use my own experience because someone on that committee was really, I think also had focused more on academia and literature early in her career, and then had become more of a fiction and nonfiction writer as she progressed. So she was interested in that. I mean, I'm uncomfortable saying maybe they just saw something in me, but maybe they did, She helped me get this book done, so maybe she did. And I think a lot of, as best I could, I tried to choose people who would be interested in this working class. When I started, I was in women's studies, right? But then I changed to class, but there's honestly not a lot of people that study that or focus on that at the university. So I did as best I could. Finding people who would be supportive. And I was very fortunate with the women that were on my committee, the doctors. So, thank you. Yes, sir.
Can you talk a little bit about the idea of resistance that you've brought up? Because I think of my experience as a graduate student was you are encouraged to toe the line,
Yeah.
not to resist dumb rules. And I think of truck driving as you have a lot of regulations and rules to follow. How do you work resistance into that?
I'd
Because
say,
there's plenty to resist against.
well, and so for me, there are a lot of rules and regulations, but the resistance came in how do I speak up when we're seeing things like no lunch break, right? Or we would get paid time and a half if we started before 5 a.m., because a lot of times there'd be these early pours. And then without being notified of it, they changed it to before 4 a.m., right? And they didn't tell us. And I found out 2 weeks later, and I said to my driver manager in passing, that seems a lot like stealing. And lo and behold, a few days later, it was back to 5 a.m. And the general manager came up to me and was like, well, you got what you wanted. Yeah, so a lot of it is having the courage to just say something. And interestingly, a lot of drivers won't, which is so frustrating because we have the power, together. If all those mixer trucks are just sitting there, parked, nobody's getting their concrete, that'd be a problem. But people aren't invested in that. I think some people have a little bit more to lose than I did as far as, they've got 5 kids and a family and they've been here for 15 years. It's riskier. So whenever I could, I would try to be the one. If I knew you had something to say, I'll say it for us. And sometimes they were up there with me, and sometimes it was like, I don't know what she's talking about. Okay. So that's what I did. And even now I have a different job. It's a totally different thing. That always, I cannot just, I just try to just be a good driver, you know, but it's really hard because when you see something, you got to say something. So, yeah. So, does that answer your question,
Yeah,
Steve?
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, and you live a bit of it.
Well,
You resist stereotypes
thank
and
you.
expectations, so.
Thank you.
That's good.
Thank you. I think 1 o'clock, right? Okay. I have 5 more minutes worth of trucking stuff.
So I actually have 2 questions. So you've been in the trucking world for 20 years. So has it changed for women? And then also, what has been the reaction of people in that world to the fact that you have a PhD in literature?
Okay, very good question. So, yeah, it's been 20-something years. That's weird to realize. And it's pretty consistently been, the numbers say you'll read about 10%, there's about 10% female drivers, right? Like in the industry, 10% are women. I feel like that's high based on what I see, and I don't know, sometimes I think they're counting people in dispatching roles and things like that. Out of 50 mixer drivers here, though, at the time when I was working, there was a point we had 5 women, so that shakes out and was frankly pretty surprising. But I feel like that has been fairly constant over the career. I'll see them occasionally. I wrote a little bit about this when I would see there's maybe 4 women I can think of out of 1,000+ guys in the concrete world, you know, and 1 in the construction, like your Samsons and your Housemans, those big companies. There was 1 female that I consistently see. So, you know, there's the numbers, and then you're out there and you don't see women. So whenever I did, I was like, oh my God, like I'd kind of be staring and then realize that I'm doing the same thing that people are doing to me and I don't like. I would just be fascinated by this, like to see this woman in this environment, which must have been me to other people. So it was a really weird moment. I forgot the second half of your question. Yeah.
When people in your trucking part of your world know that you have a PhD in literature.
At the end of this, I talk a little bit about like what people maybe think, like, did she just get complacent and not go out and try to be a professor? I'm like, no, that wasn't it. Like, that was a conscious choice. But they would always, here in the concrete industry, it was really fascinating. They're all very supportive, you know. Once they got to know me and saw that I could drive the truck, because there was a lot of, do you want me to help you back up? No, I don't need you to actually. It would be better if you stood over to the side, okay? Just confusing me with like that kind of thing. We all got along really well, and they would periodically ask me how school was going and those things. So, but there's a moment in here that I wrote about where, I have poured concrete so many places at the university, so many things. I've had a hand in that over like 6 years of doing it. And I was pouring directly outside of the English building one time. I could see what had been, at the time it was still my office window, directly outside Andrews Hall. And the guy had asked me to pull my mixer truck up on the sidewalk so he could use my water hose, because there's a water hose on the back of the trucks. We carry water, not to drink, but mix in the concrete. And I said, okay. But now I was like so close to the building I couldn't resist. I said, you have to take a picture of me, please, in my truck, because I go to school here. And he's like, really? You go to school here? Yeah, this is my building. That's my office. And he's like, are you serious? You want a picture? Yeah, man. Like, I need a picture. And he's like, all right, I'll do it. And so it's in here in the front of the book. There's me. That's the day. And 138, that was my truck number. So 138 and me right in front of Andrews Hall there. And he goes, so you want to be a teacher or something? I said, well, I did, but now I think I've sort of changed my mind. And he's like, I totally get it. They don't have any idea what goes on out here. You know, like he was living that, like, this is another world. Like the people that work inside these buildings, that is another type of individual. They don't understand us. And so there it is, that, you know, So there it is. And I think that's, and my coworkers, it's so funny sometimes, they would say, oh, you're reading again? You're just reading again? What is that word? And I'm like, this isn't a big word, but like, to them it was a big word, you know, but they were all really supportive. I'd be doing my homework. I'd do my homework. I wrote my dissertation in the mixer truck for the most, and they're all very supportive, but that doesn't mean that, you know, they were at book events either or things like that. And that's the frustrating part, because I just so want it all to come together, and it just won't come together. So, and now it's time, and I don't want to stop. So, yeah.
Well, I'd just like to thank you so much for coming and doing this and give you this little gift from Lincoln City Library.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.